Hey guys, Kristen, I'm back here, and in today's topic we're talking about breeding horses, and specifically we're referencing Hidden Blade's comment on one of our channels about, horses being bred really hot and being bred where they potentially are harder to handle.
Right.
And our thoughts on that.
So, there's been a lot of controversy over the years with rollkur, tension, hyperflexion, stress disorders in horses. And this is something that we have also talked about as well. Is it training? Is it breeding? Or is it both?
I think there's an aspect of both that can be in play, because you have the hotter horses. You have to do different things. You have to figure out what works for the horse to bring out that relaxation. So then you have, people with their timelines and their time crunches and everything else that don't necessarily want to work with the horse's timeline and just kind of shove everything together in, a specific time frame and meet whatever their goals are and whatever their competition goals are. So I think it's a combination of both, but personally, I believe it's more so the training, and that, you train tension, you train that anxiety, you're going to continuously have that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that training is a large part of it, and that with these hotter horses, you have to go slower. And it's going to be interesting.
Make it interesting.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see, because with these new rule shifts that they have in Great Britain in the jumper ring, where they have gotten rid of a lot of the pieces of equipment that can cause, quick reactions from a horse. There are riders that are saying, I can't ride without these bits because my horse is too hot, too strong. And it's going to be interesting to see if this stuff takes, which I hope it does, takes effect worldwide, right? They're saying no crank nosebands. They're saying no double nosebands, no rope nosebands on the horses. They're saying it's no Prince of Wales spurs. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they're coming out with that they're just immediately banning, because it really is awful for the animals. And it's going to be interesting to see that if that stuff takes effect and people aren't willing to take the time to train, are we going to go back in breeding and say, hey, maybe these really hot-blooded horses aren't worth it to breed, right? Maybe we go back to what the horses used to be like in the 70s, because they weren't as hot. There was a whole transformation in dressage about 30 years ago where we couldn't even figure out how to ride these horses. They were so hot and so out of their mind that we had to change our training methods to try to figure out how to ride them. So if the rules, which I like the rules being changed, are forcing us to say, hey, take a step back, we got to look at training. And we are no longer going to be able to use these tools effective immediately. What do you do with these horses? Yeah. Because financially, whether or not you like it this way, financially, a lot of owners aren't going to be willing to pay a trainer to take 12 years to produce a horse. They just aren't going to do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be that way. I mean, I don't produce my horses that way, but I have a different kind of owner. So is it possible that the pressure will get put back on the breeders to change the breeding? What do you think?
Could be possible. I mean, with anything like this, there's a variety of different ways that things can go, and there could be some third, fourth, fifth option that we haven't even thought of. Yeah. That's just out left field or whatever. I think, though, that it could potentially go back to the breeding and the breeders and everything, especially if it actually does take that long to work these horses in a way that keeps them relaxed, keeps them going, and they're not that hot, and they can be rideable and manageable. If it takes all that time, right? If it takes too long, so to speak, then yeah, it is a problem, and you have to look at what is the fix for that. In that case, it would be, the temperament. Do you bring in, your quieter horses? You look at, one of the things that sometimes drives me nuts is like people tend to look more at the stallion line, but the mare influences a lot.
They do, yeah.
And like, okay, the stallion is this fancy, famous dressage horse, or this jumper, or whatever it has. It has all these accolades and all these performance credentials and different things. Okay. And the mare, maybe she didn't do anything much, or she had an injury or something happened that she doesn't have all those accolades. But if her temperament, let's say both of them are a 10, you can't expect a 5 out of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, people, I don't like my mare, so I'm going to breed her. God,
But temperament makes a big deal of it. You also have to think about, like, okay, especially if the mare is new, you don't necessarily know how they're going to raise, maybe what they're going to, who's going to stamp what in the fold,
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that. You look into stallions that have already had foals and everything, and the different mares that they've had. But, if it is being that these horses are just too hot, that it takes an extraordinary amount of time to get through to keeping them relaxed and doing this. It's one thing if it's just like, okay, this horse just needs it for not just mental, but physical development too, then yeah, that's what the horse needs. And I wonder how much also plays into the tension and the reactivity of these horses, because it's the physical development isn't being allowed to come through fully enough.
Sure.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you have to wait until the horse is 6, 7, 8 years old before you start them. No, that's silly. But I'm saying, like, okay, if you're backing your 3-year-old, even if you're just sitting on a 2-year-old, I'm not saying necessarily start a 2-year-old or go, but backing a 2, 2.5, 3-year-old and just sitting on them and just getting them used to the weight and the difference of that, and then balancing with a few steps at the walk and how to kind of turn the vaguest, understanding of that. That's something. But if you're hopping on your 3-year-old, 3.5-year-old, even 4-year-old, if they're being just started at 4, or any horse really at an age over 3, if you're just starting them and they haven't really done a whole lot of work, I'm not talking about any groundwork or whatever, but you go on and you do walk, trot, canter, quick turns, whatever, you're jumping a course, height-wise, it can vary, I know, and I know you work up to the course and everything else, but if you're not getting time for the horse to develop the muscling, develop the strength and a balance to be able to do all those things, you're also going to be creating a problem.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, we make these horses to be really hot. We shortcut the training and don't give them the time they deserve. And so unfortunately, these horses end up experiencing more pain because their mouth isn't any less sensitive. Their sides aren't any less sensitive. Their noses aren't any less sensitive. So these people that come in and just crank down the nose band, put in like 4 or 5 bits. And I saw another comment that said, which was true. They said that, I look at some of these bridle setups that some of these jumpers had on, and it looks like a torture device. And it really does. I mean, when it gets to the point to where there's so much leather on a horse's face that you can't tell which rein is going where, and where the points are, you got to ask yourself, is it actually fair to be competing that horse? Because people say, well, my life is at risk. And I'm like, well, yeah, but your horse has got to be miserable the whole time. So maybe it's that horse is not able to do that. It's not how much can we force them to do it. Maybe they actually aren't able. They can be physically able, but not mentally able. And that's an issue. We as breeders and trainers we make the moral decision to put this mare with this stallion together. And we make the moral decision to continue the training to send that horse to competition. That is our choice. That is not theirs. And if we start taking away all of this tack, which I think it's great, we should, some of those horses won't make it to competition. And you know what? I think that's a good thing.
Or they might not make it as soon as somebody wants, because the other aspect too to look at is the riders.
Right.
Right? Because again, we have all this equipment and different stuff that we might be using to rely on, and then we're not utilizing ourselves the way we need to be.
Right. It's going to force us to change.
There's nothing wrong with a sensitive horse. There's nothing wrong with a hot horse or a very athletic horse, but you have to know how to ride that particular horse that you're on at the time, right? And ride it well enough that that you can see when it's, getting anxious or whatever. You can feel that, you can make the changes, and you can come in as you need, but you don't have to do necessarily a whole bunch of gadgets.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let us know your thoughts. And I love comments like the one we had. It helps us know what it is you guys want us to talk about. And sometimes, like in this aspect, Beck and I were already talking about it ourselves, and we're like, okay, we're going to do it. So thank you so much for joining us, and feel free to comment below.